Chernobyl nuclear power station suffered in April 1986 the most severe accident to any civil nuclear reactor, with very significant dispersal of radioactive material in the immediate vicinity and also through transporting on winds over considerable parts of Eastern, Western and Northern Europe. The journey to Chernobyl took approximately 2 hours overall, and we were told that there would be checkpoint monitoring, but this didn't in fact occur. What we did see was inside the 30-kilometre zone continuous spraying of the roads by water lorries in order to keep the dust down, and this spraying was a continuous activity to help reduce the radiation that would be taken in by anybody working in the zone. In fact, it would be wrong to say that the view from the road was vastly different to that seen travelling through areas outside the dome. Probably the impact of desertion was greater seeing uncultivated gardens around houses rather than abandoned agricultural buildings. We went to the nearby, effectively company town of Pripyat. Here the impact of desertion and the human impact was very strong. There's a famous image of a big wheel just silent, and on the balconies, although we couldn't see curtains, whether they'd been taken down or torn down, we didn't know, but there were still washing lines with clothing and children's toys. As when the accident had happened, it had been a festival festival weekend. Children were allowed to play out over the weekend before the evacuation was organised on the Monday. Undoubtedly, there were unnecessary doses incurred, which even if an immediate evacuation couldn't have occurred, people could have been told to stay inside, which would have significantly reduced the doses. Everybody in the town would have known that there was something very seriously wrong with the reactor. Visiting the power station itself was a very sobering activity. The fact that the Ukraine's need for power meant that the 3 other remaining reactors on site had to be kept going, which meant that people were incurring doses. That was something notable. Also, the fact that people were happy to stand outside, standing around chatting and smoking, indicated they were not so concerned about dose, but it was also perhaps indicative of general management attitudes on the site. The corridor from the operating reactor next to the damaged one was known as the Golden Corridor, a very long, 100-metre long corridor. And certainly that was quite chilling, knowing what was on the other side. We were not unduly concerned about radiation doses ourselves, but what was extremely sobering was seeing the site, what we could see of the damaged reactor, although partly covered by this sarcophagus covering built for it after the accident, and just to see the site, knowing the stories of the people who had been there at the time, the operators who had realised that their reactor was out of control, that you should not be able to see the top of the nuclear fuel at a reactor. You should not be having explosions in a reactor core. You should not have nuclear fuel and isotopes dispersed on the roof of a building, setting fire to it. It brought all of those things home, and above all, the heroism of those having to deal with the immediate aftermath, those incredibly brave people flying helicopters over the actual reactor fire to try to put the fire out using a mixture of sand and boron, with their only protection being some rubberized lead shielding. But most of those pilots and people affected in the immediate aftermath died of acute radiation poisoning. Not that great a number, but incredibly brave, because they would have known the risks they were taking.